Her name is Christine Cooley. She's the executive director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. That agency works in 4 counties: King, Pierce, Kitsap, and Snohomish County. Their work is directed at protecting public health, improving neighborhood air quality, and reducing our region's contribution to climate change. The agency has recently drafted a regional climate action plan. First time they've done that, I believe. And Ms. Cooley has over 20 years of dedicated service to environmental protection, and she carries a deep commitment to addressing the severe impacts of air pollution on overburdened communities. So please welcome Christy Cooley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Cooley. I am the Executive Director of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, but among climate friends, please call me Chrissy. I think this timing, this setup with these speakers worked out really well because Councilwoman Balducci was able to share the vision and the urgency for why we're talking about the things we're talking about today. Vicki did such a great job going over the King County plan. I'm going to talk to you about the regional climate action plan. And the most important thing I want to tell you is that this is not about just another plan or a competition. This is about getting all of the existing climate action plans. This region is so fortunate to have decades of history of good climate action planning. We're trying to compile that all into one comprehensive plan that then we can leverage for greater resources, economies of scale, and getting those decisions down to the local levels. So I originally had a bone to pick that I was going to be the last person over these 2 powerhouses, but I get it now, so thank you. Thank you very much. John, could you change it? Thanks. So I'm just curious, how many of you have heard of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency? Oh, that warms my heart. Okay, fantastic. Oh, yeah, good. So we have actually a new vision and mission statement that we work together with our staff and our community members as part of our 2023 strategic plan. And our new vision statement is healthy air, climate, and environmental justice for the benefit of all people in the Puget Sound region. And our mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance air quality and public health, enforce the Clean Air Act, support policies that reduce climate change, and partners with communities to do this work equitably. So it's a really intentional choice that we put equity and environmental justice forefront in our vision and mission. I think local action, Councilwoman Balducci did such a great job talking about how local action matters now more than ever, and especially when we're talking about environmental justice. That's something in the origin story of the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. We were founded in 1967 as a result of, I believe, the environmental justice and civil rights movement to address the air pollution that we were facing. So with that, Cord already mentioned it. Sorry, there's a typo on this slide. The how will your input be used should say strategic plan. Will you go back? Thank you. So in our new strategic plan, we have 4 really ambitious goals. We are on track with all of these except for the climate goal. So we are aiming to reduce air pollution overall by 20%. We're cutting socioeconomic disparities in air pollution exposure by 50%. Cutting cancer risk from air toxics by 50%. We know from our air toxic studies that that's largely due to diesel exhaust, especially in this particular region where we stand right now, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by half. So we do that by serving this jurisdiction in a variety of roles. We are regulators, we're educators, we're technical experts, and the most important role I feel for reaching the scale that we need to reach is convener collaborator. So next slide. I was going to take this opportunity just to share a few more resources that the agency has to offer. All of you are so involved, and I hope you spread the word. If you go to our website, you can find real-time live monitoring data across the 4 counties. Every single person that lives in the Puget Sound region lives within 4 kilometers of an air monitor sensor, which is great for ambient air. We have a sensor lending library, so if you're doing community events, if you know any kids that you'd like to work with them, you can get a sensor for free from the agency to see real-time monitoring data. We do have a sponsorship program. We have a speakers bureau, like I'm speaking to you today. You're welcome to invite people who know much, much more about this topic than me to your events. We have a wood stove removal incentives program, and we have other incentive programs like with our trucking community to help make decarbonization more affordable to everyone. And then we also take complaints if you have air quality concerns, and we'll follow up on those complaints. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is our Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program and its primary deliverable, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So again, not to take the place of any existing plan, it's in fact just built up of all existing plans in the region to be the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Next slide. So the agency received a grant from the Federal Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG, in 2023 to lead regional climate action planning. Because we do serve the 4 counties, we were uniquely situated to be able to do this type of coordination. And originally the grant went to the top 67 MSAs, metropolitan statistical areas. Here that's Bellevue, Tacoma, Seattle. But because we already serve the 4 county region, we asked the EPA if we could kick out the boundaries to be more inclusive and have a more comprehensive climate action plan. So they allowed us to do that, and now the agency is still in the development. We haven't finished it yet. We're still in the development of that plan for the Puget Sound region, and it'll be completed by December 1st, 2025. All right, next slide, thank you. So one of our goals is to leverage the planning process for enhanced regional collaboration. We have teams of experts involved in the planning process. What you see here is sort of an org chart of how this is all working. The agency is coordinating, we are not leading. We are relying on local leadership from our steering committee members that are from each of the 4 counties and the largest cities in each of those 4 counties. And then most importantly, we have these technical working groups that are the subject matter experts that are providing input into the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. We're fortunate to have people like Vicki, who served on the equity team, many other experts contributing to getting the facts right of this plan. Next slide. So the goal of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan is to create a long-term regional plan to achieve climate goals, align with and complement state and local plans, build regional collaborations for collective climate action plans, and I was adamant about putting this one in because I don't want this to be about the plan. A lot of work has gone into building these collaborations, and once we get that plan, we want to continue that collaboration and implementation, because that's what's really going to matter, is moving the needle and getting the reductions we want to see. And then make our region more competitive for grant applications. Even though the federal environment is what it is, there's a lot of good federal opportunities still out there, and the higher quality plan that we can have in place, it's going to make us more attractive. I think, I'll speak personally, I've seen a lot of good state dollars go towards projects like Claudia was talking about that are really feel-good projects, and they might have done some good things, but did they achieve the highest and best use that those dollars could do? This plan can be a resource for community members, for jurisdictions, for anyone in a decision-making role for funding to look off the menu and say, what will have the highest impact and how can we collaborate to get the best use of that funding? So the CCAP's purpose is to identify a comprehensive list of climate strategies. We want to hear from all of you about which of those strategies we should implement and how those strategies should be implemented in your neighborhood. The community perspective is very valuable to us. We actually just wrapped a series of community events in each of the 4 counties, and a little bit later I'm going to share with you what the future ways to get involved are. All right, next slide, please. So there's many other climate action plans happening across King County. Our goal with the CCAP is to complement and support, never replace the climate planning that's already been done and continues at the state and local level. So for example, the state is also doing a comprehensive climate action plan, and that's going to examine strategies and policies that can be enacted at the statewide level. That means things like updating statewide building codes or implementing a zero emissions vehicle mandate. Cities and counties then evaluate local needs and create programs to meet state goals. For example, even though a state may implement a zero emission vehicle mandate, it's often up to local governments to actually implement those and see what makes sense for them, right down to where EV charging stations are going in. So at the regional level, we're coordinating among these different levels of action. The CCAP is the first regional climate plan for the Puget Sound. Regional agencies like ours can help to promote a collaborative approach to implementation, which can make us more competitive for funding and more effective. The agency and other partners also coordinate with tribal governments to align plans where there's opportunities to do so. So to summarize, the state, region, tribes, and counties and cities, we all have the unique opportunities to implement climate action, and the regional CCAP is filling the existing gap for regional planning and complements and builds on other planning at the state and local level. Next slide, please. Okay, all that to say, here's what's actually going to be in it. First, the CCAP will summarize baseline data on greenhouse gas emissions in our region. This helps us understand where our emissions currently come from and how they're expected to change over time. It will identify targets for reducing our regional greenhouse gas emissions. It'll create a comprehensive set of climate actions to meet our targets. It'll help analyze and prioritize community benefits, especially for communities that are disproportionately impacted by or vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And finally, it'll include an analysis of how the regional workforce will need to evolve and grow to implement the actions in the plan. And I want to be really explicit. There's an elephant in the room that this was an EPA federally funded grant. There's federal uncertainty. At this time, we have no reason to think that the funding will be pulled altogether, but regardless, the agency sees the value in this regional plan for all the reasons I've already explained, and we're committed to seeing this through. We are so close with this regional plan that's going to have such benefit at the state level. So we're going to see this through regardless of the federal uncertainty. Okay, next slide. So we're working with many partners as we develop the CCAP. That includes cities and counties, subject matter experts, utilities, transit providers, community organization, ports. So just to reiterate, very collaborative process. I'm sure you know people who are involved in this, and we want to hear your voice as well. Next slide. So here we have a snapshot of the region's emissions and where they come from. The largest emitting sector is transportation, which is about 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation sector includes emissions from all vehicle types. Then buildings, as the second highest emitting sector, account for 39% of total emissions across the region. This sector includes emissions from powering residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, the electricity they use, as well as fuels like natural gas that power appliances like furnaces, water heaters, and stoves. Next up is land use, which accounts for 13% of regional emissions. This sector includes emissions from agriculture and the loss of natural landscapes. And then finally is refrigerants, which accounts for 5% of regional emissions. This sector includes emissions from equipment that uses refrigerant gases, air conditioners, even heat pumps, and larger industrial equipment. And then last, we have waste and wastewater, which accounts for 3% of the regional emissions. So now we'll look ahead of how we can achieve our regional targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions. Vicki had a very similar wedge analysis in her presentation. They're very useful tools. And that was a great question about what will we do if the federal policies don't come to fruition. It's just going to gain the wedge of what we need to figure out with our local planning. So this graphic shows how emissions may change over time given different policy scenarios. On the horizontal axis, we have time in years, and on the vertical axis, we have amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. So the solid black line on the left represents historical greenhouse gas emissions. The dashed red line at the bottom of the chart illustrates the emission reduction targets we saw on the last slide. And the dashed black line, number 1 on the top of the chart, shows how emissions are predicted to grow if we make no reduction efforts at all. The top green wedge, number 2 on the chart, shows the anticipated greenhouse gas reduction impacts of existing federal and state policies, such as fuel efficiency standards for passenger vehicles, and the blue line right below that shows where emissions will be as a result of those policies. And then the yellow wedge, number 3 on the chart, shows us what additional reductions would need to be made if we're going to meet our 2050 emission reduction target of 50%. This modeling shows us how much additional effort is needed to meet our climate goals, which leads us to our task, closing the emissions gap with additional reduction strategies so that we can meet our climate goals. Next slide. I actually think Vicki did a better job covering some of these specific sectors, so I'm going to move ahead and skip this slide so I can tell you about the timeline for the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan and how you can get involved. So last winter, we drafted the list of greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies and actions. There was a priority climate action plan given the timing with the federal administration. That priority climate action planning is what helped result in the $50 million grant that King County was the recipient of. I can say, I don't have it in writing, but I was told that it was the best written application in the entire country, so yeah. Pretty awesome stuff, and it goes to show that our region really does have the experience and the decades of good climate planning to build from. So like I said, we just wrapped a workshop in each of the counties to inform guidance on how strategies should be implemented at the county level. Those were very well attended. We got some great feedback. We're sorting through it now, making adjustments in the plan, and in the summer, we'll finalize the emission reduction strategies and compile the draft Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So in the fall, we'll invite your feedback on the draft CCAP through our online open house and compile the final CCAP document, which is due to EPA in December. So there is no single entity that will carry out this plan. There's no single funding source available for implementation. Our success depends on collaborative actions from many partners and getting the buy-in of this being the regional plan that will guide efforts. So if you'd like to stay involved, next slide, thank you. You can join our mailing list to get updates on the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. You can take the survey and provide your own feedback. You can email us directly, visit the program website for CCAP or anything that the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency does. I really want to thank you all for being here today. I think the conversations at the local level are really where it starts, where the rubber hits the road. So I'm happy to be here today, and then I'll end with a shameless plug. We're also doing an art contest for any artists who would like to have art contributed into this CCAP. It's a fun thing, and we want to show the vibrancy of our region, not just the wedge analysis. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Your presentation was excellent. That's the way a presentation should be done. In fact, the last two, yours was and the lady. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Take that.
Right here. Hi there. Chris Randalls with the organization Complete Streets Bellevue. It's one that really cares about transportation and land use. And notice that your pie chart called out land use as kind of a source of emissions. I guess when we talk about land use, we think about it less about kind of agricultural and landscaping and more about how our cities and region are organized to encourage more efficient transportation, more efficient land, housing patterns, et cetera. So really curious, like at this regional level, how will this plan kind of incorporate actions that account for like more sustainable land use practices, and how will this plan kind of interface with reviews of cities' individual comprehensive plans as they get implemented over the next few years?
So I'll say we're right in the middle of it, so please submit that question. That's a great question. So we're taking all of the existing climate action plans, and fortunately, climate action plans across the 4 counties, a lot of them have measures for land use preservation, reforestation throughout. So we're taking those in and we're trying to find where they match up, like where we could find partnerships to get those economies of scale for programs in all variety of areas. And then wherever we're missing the mark, that's what we need to fill in now of we got to fill it out. We got to figure out some sort of strategy to get from here to there. But that's a really great question. I'd actually like to talk to you more about it.
Hi, my name's Tasha Brown, and I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you're going to keep moving forward despite what's happening at the federal level, and then how all of us can help with that.
I'm like a little bit nervous, if I'm being totally honest. I have a bold idea. So there's a lot of funding in Washington State. Washington State gets it, and they're working hard. And things like the Climate Commitment Act that voters turned out for, that's generating revenue. And that's also not the only funding for climate policy, too. The thing that, and I'll just speak as me, not as the agency, the thing that is so frustrating to see, it was when you see really well-intentioned projects spending money on things that we know, we have the science, that it's not the best use of funding. So I think the benefit of using this comprehensive climate action plan as a menu is having our decision makers have to order on menu for the things that we've prioritized to have the biggest difference. Does that make sense?
Hi, Ann Fletcher here. I wondered how much of the transportation, 40%, was airplane, and we suddenly had to add that into our climate action plans. We had never done that locally before, so I'm really curious about that.
I do not have a magic notebook like Vicky does, but if you email me, I could follow up. The agency has a wonderful team of experts, and I can't take credit for their calculations.
In Bellevue, it's 15% of the total emissions pie currently, if that helps. Other questions?
Do you know? King County is 21%. Magic notebook coming through.
Hi, I'm Claudia Hershey. This is a question to either of you. Do you have, are there measures of effectiveness for equity to measure whether or not these investments actually are going into the areas that are low income, and using actual data, like geographically, these are the low income or the higher, those that are receiving higher pollutants. For example, of the 1 million trees that were planted, were they planted in those areas? Were any street trees planted in White Center? And I'm a transportation professional. I could talk about transit for a really long time if you wanted it. And there's a lot of conflict of interest, shall we say, about the distribution of transit service.
I'll speak, and then you should definitely add to this. I'm so glad you add this. I can't believe I forgot to mention a talking point in here. Some of the requirements of the CCAP are to, 1, have a workforce development analysis, and 2, have a low-income disadvantaged communities analysis. So where are the benefits, not just the funding, but where are the benefits going to show up in LIDAC communities? Unfortunately, the EPA has since decided that that's no longer a requirement of the CCAP, and we've been directed, along with all the other 67 groups doing comprehensive climate action planning, that we should use more useful analysis like economic development. We are not doing that. We're sticking with the LIDAC analysis. And I can't believe I forgot to mention that, so thank you so much for saying that. Do you want to add?
You all hear me? And I don't think you're asking specifically for the county, but I can speak to county. And really, you know, when I talked about, we received the $50 million four-county grant, and that is really about building decarbonization. So it's about a whole suite of strategies to support decarbonizing buildings, improving electrification. And what was interesting about the way that grant was developed, I did not write it. I was a contributor along with many other people, but I was not the lead. We have phenomenal staff that led that work that are brilliant and incredible. Credit to them. But one of the things that we decided to do is that we said, here, it's kind of like she was talking about the menu, like what are the biggest GHG emissions, right? Like where is that happening the most? We know buildings are. So let's have some strategies. We had a set of strategies to vote on, and we said, although we could actually we could reduce emissions, GHG emissions a bit more if we took a different strategy. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on those communities that are going to have the hardest time affording some of these improvements and electrification improvements, and we're going to focus also on the most vulnerable populations. And by that I mean socially vulnerable, because I'll tell you that communities of color do not like being called vulnerable. They have a lot of strengths, a lot of power. They know how to pivot, extremely strategic, bring a lot of wisdom. Not vulnerable, but there are communities that are, right? And we're talking about young children. We are talking about seniors. We are talking about people on fixed incomes. We're talking about people that are living in housing that is not up to par, naturally occurring affordable housing. We call that NOAA, right? So think about, like, you know, that building owned by a landlord who maybe doesn't put a lot of money into maintenance or making sure that this is a weatherized building. So what we did is prioritize that the funding that will go towards specifically those communities, those geographic areas, and that there will be a bunch of strategies. There will be some grants, there will be some low interest loans, and then there will just be infusions of tax credits, et cetera, for communities.
We have time for one more question.
Hi there, my name's Devin. I'm from Redmond. I'm also part of People for Climate Action. And I had a question about, we talk a lot about the emissions reductions of electrifying our buildings and our homes. One thing that I'm hearing a lot from families and for myself, one of the things that led us to decarbonize our home is the indoor air quality effects of methane and the other pollutants that are in natural gas. And so I'm just wondering what you're doing to address those in the plan, and also community safety for the infrastructure too. We had a 7 million cubic feet of methane leaked in December near Union Hill. And so those are things that are not only health, but air quality issue, but safety issue for our community. So are you addressing those in the plan? Thanks.
So the plan is really about prioritizing climate actions, greenhouse gas emissions, and as part of this weighted decision matrix of how we're prioritizing, it includes the LIDAC analysis, the workforce development analysis. I could tell you all the things we're doing for just Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, because this is just one of our programs where we're addressing public health as the primary concern. For the climate action plan, it's really greenhouse gas emissions first.
Well, let's give a round of applause and appreciation for Christine Cooley.